the director of CIHRS. It's my pleasure and honor to welcome you all in Salon Ibn Rushd, which was held in Cairo Institute in Cairo, Egypt, for being there for 20 years. Now we are obliged to meet online through the internet platform. So in this salon, as you may know, the main subject is the national strategy of human rights, which was announced by the Egyptian government in September 11th, 9 days ago. And I'm quite happy within this context to share by discussing from different academic backgrounds, political and cultural different backgrounds, Mr. Muhammad Anwar al-Sadat, the legislative member of the parliament and head of the Reform and Development Party and general coordinator of the International Dialogue Group, Dr. Michel Dunn. He's the director of the Middle East Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. It seems there's a problem, an issue with the voice, I guess. Yeah, I think there's the voice of the translation is intermingling with my voice in the platform.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
كما كنت أقول.
So as I was saying,
برنامج الشرق الأوسط في كارنيجي وهي خبيرة.
Dr. Michelle, she's the director of the Middle East program in Carnegie Endowment for International Peace.
هذا الحوار وهو يعني ما أعرفش أقدمه إزاي، هو متعدد
I don't know how to introduce him because he's absolutely he's very known and he's a professor and a diplomat. You're professor of political science.
كان يسعدنا وحاولنا
we try to invite the ambassador who is in charge of setting up this strategy. I think the voice is cutting. The voice is cutting of the speaker.
أعتقد إنه في مشكلة في الترجمة. تاخذوا لحظة أن نشوفوا المشكلة منين ونصلحوه. لحظات. فوزي أنا أقترح أني نطلعك كمترجم وبعدين نحطك مرة ثانية.
Okay, great. Okay, تمام. Thank you.
لو ممكن نحاول مرة أخرى.
هل نبدأ نعود الآن؟ أوكي، أعتقد الدفة الآن عند الدكتور عز الدين فيشير.
شكرا أستاذ بهي، وشكرا لمركز القاهرة، وشكرا للأستاذة ميشيل دان والأستاذ أنور السادات على المشاركة.
Al-Sadat for participation. I guess there's a high appreciation for organizing this webinar. So the idea itself of that the Cairo Institute is really debating the national strategy of human rights subjectively. It's a very constructive idea, and it's a good way and method to deal with the steps taken by the Egyptian government, either by debating or discussing on either whether our point of view were positive or negative towards this strategy is a very constructive way to deal with this strategy. I'm not going to take long. I'm going to make my interventions shorter in time. I just want to implement the instructions received from the security administration of this dialogue. I just want to have your attention for some general rules. So first of all, if any participant is facing any difficulties to Zoom, so they might need to refresh the application, then he's going to take to the file, check updates, and then download the latest update. This would take about 1 minute. Second, there's a choice with regard to the buttons of translation. I'm going to talk in Arabic. Some of the participants, they may speak in Arabic also, and there's also English translation. So you can choose either Arabic or English if you wish to. At the bottom of the screen where there's the globe where you can find it. So the third technical remark for the participants, and I'm going to have a demonstration for this remark. It's required from you to speak slowly to enable the translator or translators to translate at the same time, simultaneously. And I think this would provide us an opportunity to think during the speech. The last remark for the participants: if you have any question, there's a button at the screen with Q&A, and you can write down the questions you want to address it either to the panel as in general, or to a specific participant, or any topic that you want to raise and to participate. I'm going to, as much as possible, I'm trying to absolutely tackle all these questions. So we have decided to be traditional in the webinar. So instead of have 3 long interventions, so we are going to try to organize the dialogue 3 main questions. So first of all, the first question is the context where this strategy has been announced, and what does it mean to be now. The second is the assessment of the strategy itself, the negative and the gaps, but also what are the positive points. And 2 other questions we are going to absolutely ask them later on. So I'm going to start the context in which this strategy has been announced, and I'm addressing, if it's possible, if you, Michel Dan, could talk to us about the context of the Egyptian-American relationships and what are the main points of this strategy. You got from 5 to 7 minutes. Please go ahead. You got the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Ustaz Adin and Ustaz Behi, and Your Excellency Sadat. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. So in terms of US-Egyptian relations, from my point of view, what is going on, the release of this strategy and some other steps that we see happening in Egypt now suggest that the Egyptian government has decided that its human rights practices are creating costs or problems for it in its international relations, and particularly with the United States. We all know, of course, that the Biden administration has adopted a different point of view towards human rights as part of US foreign policy from the Trump administration, that there is much more of a focus on this in US foreign policy generally, and that includes toward Egypt. And we saw, of course, recently this step in which the Biden administration is withholding a small portion of Egypt's military assistance from the United States. It is withholding 10% of 1 year's assistance to Egypt. And that is a total of $130 million that is being withheld from Egypt on some human rights conditions. And we don't know exactly what those conditions are. We can talk about this, but the Biden administration has chosen not to make them public and even will not discuss them privately, what these conditions are. But they clearly are known to the Egyptian government, and at least there has been some speculation in the media that the conditions are related to the dropping of case 173 against Egyptian human rights defenders and the release of some political prisoners in Egypt. That's what we're hearing. So, what we are seeing in Egypt now is a number of things. Of course, we saw the release of the human rights strategy. I won't say anything about that right now because I think we're going to discuss that a little bit later in this program. But we saw that, and we've seen a few other things. We've seen the dropping of charges in case 173 against some defendants, some organizations. We've seen a few political prisoners released, and there's a new report out that some of you may have seen in Mada Masr, just within the past 24 hours, saying that there are security officers are interviewing political prisoners right now with the view towards possible larger scale releases of political prisoners in the month of October. Now, what are the goals of the Egyptian government here? We've seen the Egyptian government under President el-Sisi doing a number of things that seem to be aimed at pleasing the United States and the Biden administration at improving relations. Of course, we saw the hosting of the Israeli Prime Minister in Cairo, and then we are seeing, some of these human rights steps. It seems to me that President Sisi would like a face-to-face meeting with President Biden. It seems that President Sisi did not come to New York for the UN General Assembly this week, that Foreign Minister Shukri will head the Egyptian delegation. Because my guess is that President Biden was not ready for a face-to-face meeting at this point. The Mada Masr article suggested that President Sisi may be hoping that at the Glasgow climate summit in November that he might meet President Biden. We will see. I don't know the American government's attitude toward that. So clearly it seems that President Sisi would like to have that acknowledgement of meeting with President Biden. So far, he has only spoken to him on the telephone, and perhaps would like the release of this 130 million so that Egypt would get its full package of military assistance from the United States. Let me just say that what the Biden administration has done so far has received quite a bit of criticism in the United States, including from members of Congress. There is something in the US Congress now called the Egypt Human Rights Caucus, and it has in it some fairly powerful members of Congress, primarily Democrats, and they released a statement saying they were not happy with the Biden administration withholding only 130 million and establishing a new set of conditions that are not the conditions that they are much less, it would seem, than the conditions that Congress established, and suggesting that in future years' legislation, Congress will try to tighten the conditions and make it more difficult for the Biden administration to do what it has done. So there's some displeasure from members of Congress and, of course, human rights organizations. A large number of human rights organizations put out a statement. And the basic point is this, that I think that people in the United States, whether it's members of Congress or human rights organizations who care about this issue of human rights in Egypt and how the United States is trying to support improved human rights in Egypt, feel that what the Biden administration has done is far too little, that this is a very serious, large-scale human rights problem in Egypt, and that the steps that the Biden administration have taken and what they are likely to lead to are very small steps and not in keeping in size and seriousness with the nature of the problem in Egypt. I'll stop here for now.
Before we let you go, I have a follow-up question on this. As you said, those conditions and the amount of the aid that is withheld is much less than what the Congress had anticipated. And in the broader picture of US assistance, it's a tiny amount. On the other, also, that question of President Sisi meeting with President Biden, they already spoke on the phone. So in a way, there is, the ice, the glass has been broken, and Biden's earlier pledges during the campaign have been abandoned. At the same time, the Egyptian government understands perfectly well that its assistance to American foreign policy in the region is needed and appreciated in Washington, and Secretary Blinken reiterated that several times. So, and bluntly, why would the Egyptian government really care about those conditions? And what stops the Egyptian government from simply ignoring them and going on with their business as usual?
That is indeed a possibility, and perhaps the Egyptian government will just forego the 130 million in military assistance and say we're not meeting any conditions and let it go. But I would just say that's not what we seem to see happening. What we see is some steps. I think they are very modest steps, but we do see the Egyptian government taking some steps that appear to be aimed at improving, at least the impression overseas of its human rights record. It seems that that's the positive thing, that we are at a point where perhaps the Egyptian government, whether it wants to improve human rights for its own reasons is another story, but at least the signs are that they are willing to make what may end up being only very small improvements, but trying to do something to correct this impression, which is a correct impression, that Egypt is one of the biggest abusers of human rights in the world, and this is I just want to say this is increasingly uncomfortable for the United States. Egypt's human rights record is, it's among the worst in the world. It's far worse than the human rights record of many countries that the United States criticizes night and day for their human rights records.
Okay, so just to be clear, the conditions or the improvements, the steps that the Egyptian government is asked to take are limited, a much watered down version, right? And the expectation, the reasonable expectation, is that the Egyptian government will either ignore them or take some steps to give the impression that they are meeting those already watered down conditions. So the amount of improvement that we are talking about is pretty limited. Are we in agreement on that?
Yes, that's what, from what I can see, and of course I'm watching it from far away, but from the signals that I can see, it looks like what we're talking about is dropping charges against some people, like human rights defenders, dropping restrictions on them, like travel bans, asset freezes, releasing some people from prison, perhaps primarily people who are in pretrial detention. But what we are not seeing so far is any sign of what I would call systemic improvements. For example, changes in the laws that have been used, or in the usage of some of the laws, like the anti-terror law and the law against terrorist entities that have been used against people who clearly are not terrorists, people who are human rights defenders or political activists. We are not seeing, and I hope we'll discuss this in the strategy, I really don't see much sign in the strategy that there is any thought to making what I would call systemic improvements.
أشكرك. أعتقد ده this is a very good transition to أنور السادات. سيادة النائب، أحب أسألك على السياق المصري الداخلي اللي في إطاره تم طرح وبلورة ومناقشة ثم طرح الاستراتيجية المصرية لحقوق الإنسان. 5 ل 7 دقائق. أنت muted أستاذ محمد.
Mr. Muhammad, you are muted.
طيب أنا تاني بشكرك
I would like to thank you again and thank all the participants and the followers and those who are listening to us. So in the beginning, I would like to clarify. I'm going to speak slowly to enable the translation. I'm not a legal activist, and I don't have an official qualification to talk on behalf of the state or about the strategy, but based on a politician and a member of the parliament, a parliamentarian. So since long years in Egypt, I've been interested in the records of human rights. So I'm quite happy on this webinar, and we are talking about the strategy where a lot of debates, those who are welcoming, those who are having reserves, and I understand really about all this. So let me say I was not a direct party in establishing this or setting up this strategy, but I was following as somebody who's interested in it, as so many. A very important point that the strategy is based on what? What is the basis? Is the constitution articles, the Egyptian, and of course our international commitments. For a long time, we've been asking and appealing and demanding the Egyptian government to be committed and to be engaged with everything with regard to the political activities, liberties and freedoms, and the democratic practices. So the state today and the president and the government and before the whole world to be committed and to say that today we are in a situation, and this is my own point of view. So why the strategy today? The Egyptian state now is in a very stable situation. And it has recovered some health, let's say, and it has judged that it's necessary and it's urgent. It's not as a result of a foreign demands or pressures, but also for its people who it is appealing for years now, either politicians, party activists, Europeans. They are demanding and appealing to open the public space in politics, in media, in the freedom of expression, and everything that has got something to do with the human rights. So I see that the state today, and to be committed in the front of everybody, I think this is a matter that we should welcome, and we should take it as a serious initiative, and to build on it, and to see how could we achieve what has been in it through a working plan, through a time table. We should not really wait for the strategy or the strategy duration for 5 years. So each year there's a need to assess what we have been achieved at the legislations, what are the regulations and laws. They should be the penal regulations about the detention and all what the capital punishment and executions, and the laws about the non-discrimination or non-bias. So we got some urgent legislations and laws, so the parliament should work on this. In addition, everybody from his own position, and to see how could we implement this strategy for the 5 years. And each year we are going to assess and to see what has been achieved. The president we said that 2022 is going to be the year of civil society. So we are waiting now, and we see this year of civil society, not only with organizations and those who are interested in development and with charity activities, but also the organizations that are working on the political training and civic activities and training, and those who are interested to follow the human rights condition in Egypt. I want to say that we have an opportunity here, and I think that to be doubtful is absolutely quite early. Because it hasn't been tested yet. So I'm saying this because I do hope that this would be achieved. And this is really my desire, because this, after all, what you have been demanding and appealing. So we could say that the strategy was made by the cabinet since 2019, and even before the Biden's presidency. So the Egyptian state, as a result of the internal appeals before the foreign or the outside appeals, means that it's time now, it's quite necessary to open all these files. And this is very important, in my opinion. Some is talking about foreign pressures. I think, in my opinion, that definitely it's very important to listen to the partners and friends. It's quite normal, but it's not the mobile. So the proof you have seen that lots of demands to release some detainees, and they haven't been answered. So the subject is not really a question of pressures. The balance between the internal and external, or the foreigners. So the relationship with the United States of America is very important. We have seen that the parliament, of course, has debated about the condition of human rights in Egypt. We have seen that the Human Rights Council in Geneva has issued a statement, and they've got some demands. What has reached up to demanding a mechanism of follow-up and the monitor of human rights conditions in Egypt. So the subject is quite old, it's being renewed, but at least Egypt, when a government and a president are committed, I think we are supposed, presumably, we start to think how we could start to achieve positive results. Because as we had, the strategy is based also on all the remarks which have been launched through the regular review in Geneva. And I think also this is what I have noted myself about the, for example, the detentions and what is absolutely about the capital punishment, torture. So there's an article, there's a matter we could build on it. And this that make me enthusiastic. And I guess that the state, for the course of the last years, achieved some successes that could be denied, either the opponents or others. So there are some successes on the level of the economic reforms and the social measures for the social justice. About the infrastructure, we cannot deny it, definitely, for sure. What is with regard to the political file and the human rights condition, no, of course, it needs an effort. It needs an interest, more interest from the state. And this is why we are enthusiastic about the launch of this initiative. So the goodwills from the state, I guess, and I think we should grab this, and we start to see what we can do in order to assist and to help. So as politicians, as legal activists, but also human rights defenders. I think some, for different reasons, some but after all, it's our country, it's our homeland. We all absolutely our endeavor, and we try to reduce the sufferings of people. So maybe the dear friend Michel has talked about the AIDS. One of the, I personally is from the school with dating not from today, but for long years. I think, and even what has been withdrawal is a symbolic, is a token, but it's a real message. And I guess that this is really providing a negative message. It's right of the USA government based on the friendship and the cooperation that the USA should provide this message directly. But I can see the message based on the withdrawal of a portion of the aid. This would provide a negative message not to the only to the Egyptian government, but to the Egyptian citizens, which with whom some is going to instrumentalize and to use against the both. To be honest, I'm not really agreeing with those who are demanding to cut the aids or even abortion as a part of the pressure. I see that there are other alternatives, other means that the USA administration and even Europe, they could really send such messages. And I think dialogue is one of them. In Egypt, we got this issue. So if the time allows, so let's move to the next question. But please allow me to ask you prior of giving the floor to Mr. Al-Bahi. You have said very important thing. You have said that the foreign aid that has been always there. That's true. That's correct. From United States or EU or international institutions, and that the internal demands or appeals are always there. So therefore, the importance of understanding why now this strategy. And you have said at the initially that the state has felt much more confidence and has recovered from the previous time. So my question is the recovery of the state. So what the state has been suffering before is the incapacity of dealing with political demands. So the solution found by the states that it imprisoned people. So how the state, while it is recovering now, is opening now the floor. So how is it opening now the floor to political demands, and at the same time that this openness would not lead to the state to feel unstable or to be fearsome? So is it my question, is it clear?
Yes, your question is clear. I'm going to try and answer this question. As I said before, I have the feeling that the state now has recovered its confidence in its institutions. It has real institutions that have been successful during the last few years, succeeded to eradicate terrorism, not only internally, but also regionally. So the state has also, and its institutions have started to achieve for the to the citizens some successes which can be felt by the citizens, even though their cost is very, very high. Like, for example, the issue of the Egyptian pound. But the Egyptian citizens are really in harmony now with this situation, and they are very patient. I think we have reached a situation where with those successes against terrorism and violence, what's been achieved on the ground regarding the infrastructures and the and opening many new horizons has, of course, enabled certain things that are positive for the institutions, whether the legislative ones, the independent councils, etc. This did encourage the state to be capable to come up with this strategy. This strategy has, by the way, started 2 years ago, not today. So the state comes now and says it's high time for us to participate, and it wants to be a part of it. Of course, as we see, as we say quickly, the most important thing is to see what's going to happen during the next days. I know that there is a commission now that is working on setting up a working plan or strategy for a limited period of time, so that people can feel that there is something that's being achieved regarding the legislations that are going to amended, improved, or regarding programs related to the culture of human rights. Be careful here, because we have a big problem at this level. We will come back to it later. Thank you. Now I will give the floor to Mr. Zahi to have his point of view with this with what's been said regarding the strategy. Mr. Bahi, go ahead. Your mic is muted, Mr. Bahi. Now, can you hear me now? Yes. Thank you to all the interventions, Mr. Anwar Sadat, Mr. I agree with them concerning many things that have been said regarding the context. I do imagine that there are 6 main features regarding the document. The first feature is the increase of worry regarding, of course, the minimum, basics regarding the future of this regime, especially when we see that there is an increase of the of course, prices in Egypt. There's also the absence of political mediators or means that can absorb any violence that could explode or appear at any moment, or to predict the impacts of such a clash regarding the stability of the actual regime. Here I'm talking about voices at low levels, not at high levels, and this shows the gap between the big predictions that took place with the that appeared with the strategic document. I have followed all the internal negotiations and debates about this, and of course we will answer later on the other questions. But the other feature in this context is that there is a unanimity from all the independent human rights organizations, the United Nations, the international human rights organizations, the European community, the most important international newspapers, and all the think tanks, across the world agree that Egypt is suffering from a catastrophic situation in terms of human rights, and an unprecedented catastrophic situation. This is the worst situation since 1952. And the third feature regarding this context is that this situation is by no way subject to any independent supervision. So not only from the civil society, but there is no supervision from the state's institutions. There is no real supervision from the parliament, and Mr. Mohammed Anwar Sadat is well placed to tell us about it, because in Egypt the parliament is not, of course, active at all. The judiciary power has been weakened during the last years. From the civil society perspective, we know that the independent human rights independent institutions are being attacked from all parts, since they never went through such a situation since 36 years. The government has expelled many foreign journalists. Academia have been facing big problems, and even some big academics institutions have started warning the academia about the risks represented by working as an academia in Egypt. So even the United Nations does not have any possibility to send its rapporteurs. When she asked they sent their rapporteur for housing in Egypt. This rapporteur had been threatened. So here, just to conclude about the context of issuance of the document, is that all the channels, the independent channels of supervision, whether from inside the state institutions or from inside the Egyptian society, all these are under threats, and these threats can be also threats of assassination. And the fourth feature regarding the context of this document is, unfortunately, the senior officials in Egypt who are connected with human rights are denying their principles, their own principles regarding human rights. The only line of defense in front of any independent report, whether it's Egyptian, of course, or international one, is a denial. They don't provide any information which denies what this report has reached. My fear, unfortunately, is that the statement or the declaration of Mr. Sisi after the announcement about the national strategy of human rights, where he denied any violation of human rights in Egypt. My fear is that this is an indicator showing that the denial strategy is continuing to even deepen, and of course it is more enshrined, and of course this is bad when we see the issuance of this strategy. The fifth feature regarding the context in which this strategy has been issued, the party that did of course prepare this strategy was the foreign affairs minister and his of course aides and assistants. So it is disconnected, of course, from reality. So the documents mission is to be, of course, a tool of managing the general relations with the international community in order to calm down this community. And I do notice in this context the timing of the issuance of the document of course, in occasion of the anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. And I don't think this is a coincidence. The sixth feature, and the last one, according to me, is the international community, how it reacted towards this document. I think according to me, the international community has not welcomed this document with enthusiasm or with positiveness. I think the declaration of the first appointment of the issuance of this document was put on the, of course, on the web page of the Egyptian embassy to Washington, before it's being, of course, published in any other media in Egypt. And here, I would like to express that I agree with Mrs. Michelle Dan. It's true that the amount of money that's been cut is relatively low, 130 million out of $10 billion, $1.1 billion. But what draws my attention here is that after 2 days, only after 2 days after the issuance of this strategy, the American administration put a check on the table of President Sisi with $150 million. And this money should not spend before dropping one case or of the different accusations against people, and to release only 16 Egyptians from the prisons, prisoners of expression, whereas we have tens of thousands of these people. So the American administration can put, it means the American administration should put $8 million for each for each Egyptian citizen. I think if the administration in the US is putting a lot of hopes on this strategy, or on a way or a different administration from President Sisi regarding human rights issues. So I think its requests would not have been so modest. Only 16, of course, Egyptians who are going to be released or have been released. Michelle, would you like to reply regarding the last point, please? Or
yes.
do you have a comment?
First of all, I would like to clarify that we don't actually know what the Biden administration conditions are for release of the 130 million. These two things that Ustaz Behe mentioned, the closing of case 173 and the release of 16 detainees, these were in some media reports, in a Washington Post report, as kind of leaks, you know. So we don't know if the demands are confined to that. Now, first of all, I don't mean to defend the Biden administration. I think that what they have done is far too little, in my opinion, but I'm just trying to clarify. What they say, what the Biden administration officials say privately, is that they are seeking systemic improvements and not just a release of few people here and there, and that whatever happens related to this 130 million, this is not the beginning and the end of their strategy in terms of engaging with Egypt on human rights. That they intend, this is just a first step, and they intend to pursue this, and they're, you know, they say, serious about pursuing larger improvements, systemic improvements. So we shall see.
Thank you. I would like to then move to the second line of questions, and we'll follow the same order. So I will begin with Michelle and ask you if you can comment on the strategy itself. What is wrong about this strategy, but also what is right about it? And I would kind of add to this, there's a question from participants. Jason Cusper from Christianity Today would like you to comment maybe on the section on freedom of religion in particular. Khalil Hamdani is asking if you think this strategy has responded to Egypt's international commitments adequately or not. And then you have 5 to 7 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Look, what is positive, I think, is, as I said, the fact that the Egyptian government felt it needed to respond to a combination, you know, and I take His Excellency Sadat's point that there were internal calls, you know, people like himself and others inside of Egypt calling on the government to make improvements. So whatever combination of internal calls, external calls, the Egyptian government felt it had to respond. That in itself is positive. What I find troubling about the strategy is a couple of things. First of all, the strategy does not acknowledge that there is a serious human rights abuse problem in Egypt. In fact, it asserts falsely, that Egypt has achieved significant national milestones in the field of human rights at the legislative, executive, and institutional levels, and thus now it just wants to build on progress already made. There is a sort of a basis of denial from which this begins, right? And then there is this emphasis on the need for human rights culture. And I know His Excellency Sadat started to speak about this and the need for improvement in human rights education and human rights culture in Egypt. I am sure that is true, that this is needed on the level of the public. But the suggestion that the basic problem in Egypt is with the public, is with the citizens, I think is ludicrous. The problem is with human rights abuses carried out by the state, and as a matter of policy, it may not be written in laws. It certainly isn't written in the Egyptian constitution, and yet we know that these human rights abuses are carried out systematically. We are not talking about a rogue officer here or there that is doing something that he should not do. That is not acknowledged here. This language about improving the culture, and it's a very long process. This is very old language. We could bring out language certainly from the Mubarak era, from 20 or 30 years ago, it suggests a denial of what's going on. There's very little in the strategy about the issue of abuses by police, security officers, army officers, certainly nothing about the army, a little bit about the police near the very end of the strategy in one of the last few pages, a very little bit about needing more police training, and a very small mention in the part of the strategy about individual actions that might be problematic. But this is not this is not the nature of the problem, and we know that, right? And this is the overall issue. I mean, I was looking at, there are throughout the strategy these boxes that have sort of target actions, like what are the goals that could be reached. And I was thinking, if all of these goals were achieved, and we know, of course, in no strategy will all of the goals be achieved, but let's just say if you took the targets or the goals and every single one of them was achieved, there would be very minimal improvements in the human rights situation in Egypt. So it is setting very, very low goals, all right, and goals that are not commensurate with the problem. I just want to quote, Hussam Bahgat was quoted in a recent New York Times story saying about Egypt, this is not a country that is in need of some legal and institutional reform, some human rights training material. It is a country that is mired in a deep human rights crisis that can only be reversed through a recognition of the depth of the crisis and a decision to shift course. We do not see that here. That does not appear in this strategy. And I will say this, U.S. officials, of course, have seen this strategy. I think they are not, however the United States engages with Egypt on human rights, and I am sure it will be too little and too small, but still, at least I think they will not build their strategy. The U.S. strategy will not be built on this strategy that the Egyptian government has announced. And so, I don't think, in terms of the questions that were asked, I don't think that we see the Egyptian government here addressing itself in a serious way to the real situation of human rights abuses, to its real international commitments, you know, and in a number of fields, and that includes religious liberty. I mean, we have seen, for example, that President el-Sisi and the government that he heads, you know, they have been willing to do a few things on behalf of religious liberty or on behalf of the rights of Christian or the building of churches. And yet still the same human rights abuses, I think, that afflict anyone who speaks out against the regime, who complains, who protests, are practiced against Christians. And we see this with the case of Patrick George Zeki and others, that they, you know, that the Christians and others, you know, in Egypt, whatever their religion, are subjected to the same human rights abuses as everyone else.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ustaz Muhammad Anwar Sadat. السؤال
Mr. Anwar Sadat, the question regarding the strategy itself.
وده جزء من الاستراتيجية.
So a part of the strategy is the human rights culture. So there's not only positive points, but also some shortcomings, especially the point pointed out by Michel Dunn, but also Bahid Hassan pointed it to, which it seems the absence, a total absence of the presence of the human rights crisis and the total lack of the human rights violation that constitutes systematic violations, part of the practice of the regime and not part of other things. So you got from 5 to 10 minutes. Thank you very much. I think that the Egyptian state and government, in order to work on a strategy from 2 years and then to come up here with it, so there needs an acknowledgement about a certain crisis of human rights, but it's a rather chic acknowledgement. So the intelligence here to be smart. So we have an issue, really issue. So through the recent years, through the recent past years, we have an issue. So with everything that is related with human rights, there's always, we question the loyalty, but also there's a fear from the activists, but those who are supporting it. And there's some apprehensions from the organizations and all those who are working in it. Either they have got special agendas. So we need to deal with this culture, which is really very important. In addition to, and here comes the role of media to educate, to disseminate education. In addition to that, the administrative apparatus in the state needs this culture, this particular culture, not only the administrative apparatus, but all the state institutions. They need to understand the human rights culture, and these rights is a natural matter mentioned in all the covenants and the agreements, and this is a major part that we should focus, and we shall focus on it. So do you see in this strategy, this part, do you see an indication of the educating the state apparatus and the security apartments? The fourth topic is talking about this building capacity of all the state institutions and the officials of it, governmental and others. So this is among the main topics. So that's why I think I do agree that the denial policy would not really benefit. So to acknowledge if there's any violations and to absolutely admit it, this is absolutely is going to increase the respect of the world to it. So when our brother Bahiyuddin said that we should have an oversight in general, either in terms of financial deals, corruption, an oversight that provides equal opportunities to all. either in terms of contracting or projects. So we need to see accountability for those who are really doing wrong. So all what you have said, I'm living it. And I think that when the state, the head of the state, the president of the republic, please know that the president, when based on initiative, encourages everybody. So this is now what's happening, that the state, the government and the state is absolutely understanding that this matter is very important to deal with it. So, of course, the state institutions fears to deal with civil society. So when the president reiterates on this on a lot of occasions and everything, this would incite and prompt and make people eager and be ready to do. So let's have a chance. So I know that the recent last years were difficult. Nobody is absolutely denying this. So when the state absolutely comes with initiative, I think we have to grab its hand. So we've been always really denouncing and always issuing announcements and statements. And I think this is a very important point. So the lower levels, that means the simple citizens, Egyptian citizens, they are angry. So this anger may be because of the living conditions. So what's more important, that they are living in a secure society. This is what matters. So I live and I turn around and they go in my electorate, and that people, they want to secure their livelihood, the livelihood of their kids and family, to find unemployment. And I think that I don't see that now the majority of the Egyptian people, they are not really happy with the situation. But in my opinion, they do not represent a major part. Second, Mr. Bahieddin mentioned the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that the Ministry of Foreign, it was chairing the committee, but this committee included 13 ministries, but also it has included activists. Everybody was participating in this. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, of course, would leading this because of it's engaging with the whole world. It could really draft and could absolutely establish it the way that would be acceptable as well. So I was not party of this, but based on what I've been reading and following. So what I want to say here, the major, sorry, apologies to interrupt you, about talking about the committee that have drafted this. So there's a question from Isra Rashid about the committee that makes the executive plan. Why has it been announced or organized a societal dialogue? Who is behind or who's in charge of the execution plan? The president, at the end of the strategy, has established 7 commitments for the government, which is there's a committee, they have to start immediately and to work on this. What I know, and based what I know, there's a committee is being established now, including some ministries and some representatives of the ministries, in order to come out with a working plan with a timeline in order to implement all what the president has absolutely ordered to do, has instructed, sorry, to do. We are all expecting. So what I want to say, that there are certain points we should not really take long. For example, for the detainees, it's quite urgent, this file, to deal with the case 173. So the major individuals in this case, the files should be shut down and absolutely drop the case. So what I want to say, there's something that is happening on the ground now. And I witnessed this myself. And so few only times there's in the government or the state institutions, there's somebody who's listening. And this is absolutely something rare. And it's happening now. So I have witnessed some humanitarian situations and some legal situations. There's some understanding with the results of releasing individuals or persons, people who have been absolutely have been outside, they've been admitted to visit Egypt. So many cases, I don't want to mention them. And this is happening right now. So I want to know that what I'm saying here, I feel like, to all who is listening to that, yes, we've been through difficult times. And all of us that we have been maybe faced with the state measures. And of course, the state was under threat of internal violence or regional violence and terrorism. And we do understand it's the right of the state to defend its principles and to defend and to use the means to defend its citizens. And I guess that there's a shift now. We are politicians and party activists and organizations, our friends abroad and the international organizations and legal activists, and we listen and we start to listen to them, the programs, how to change the culture in the media with regard to the administrative apparatus of the state. So this is the assistance, and this is what we wish to have. So, and of course, the time is going to prove here if there is a real genuine efforts or if there's any endeavor to modernize and to enhance these rights, the right for education and for healthcare, or maybe he has talked about accountability. I want here, we are following here what's happening. I have witnessed some of police officers, they have been tried. And of course, they've been prosecuted as a result of mistreating citizens. And we have witnessed this. We have seen some judges either for retirement or they have been asked to absolutely go to other functions. So this is happening. From the other party, there is other issues, other problems happening. We need here some time, and I think that all of us should absolutely push towards this, make pressure. Hopefully, in a very short time, we could reach all what we have, what we really wishing to happen. Thank you very much. You have mentioned the detainees or the prisoners. There's a question from Amr Majid from Human Rights Watch about the prisoners. And the question is saying that the data, the basic information about the prisons, the number, the nature of cases, the total number. So all these data and all these information, why the secrecy? Why absolutely all these information is not available for the public, and it's only made available for the security offices. The second one, the president of the republic is giving a sign to the state, but also to the whole society. At the same time, the president of the republic, he has announced the new prison complex has been ever built. So which side do you think, which is going to be indication? Is the first or the second? And is there an indication which is much more serious than the second one? So let me tell you about the data and information. I don't have an idea. I hear just like others, like some of them say 20,000, others 60,000. So the department which is supposed to release these data doesn't say anything. So within the framework about the concept about that this question should be submitted to the officials, and of course they are coming and they are saying that the number of prisoners, this number of X number of under investigation, etc. And they announce it. And I don't see that this is really representing an issue. The whole world has got prisons and prisoners, but the number. But let me talk to you what has been about the new complex of prisons. I've been demanding since 2005 and 2006 that we need new prisons, decent prisons. So frankly and honestly, so the subject is not connected to or with relation to the political prisons. So there are, of course, other crimes of drug. So the situation in prisons absolutely has been very difficult, horrendously. So we, of course, we've been wishing to have a health, decent situation. So frankly, we've been demanding a better situation. So we wanted to have decent humanitarian prisons so that people and the prisons could really feel much better. So the situation are much more sensitive. So the state has built new prisons, or maybe in order to enhance the prison situation. Some they are seeing that the new prisons in order to expand, really, because I'm living in this situation, and I've been witnessing that these old prisons, it's over, and the prisoners, they need to have much more civilized prison. So you are not in prison, so the crimes, the crime are not going to put an end. Of course, either the homicide or drugs or rape. Of course, these crimes are there, and of course they are going to serve that time. I'm not talking specifically about the political prisons. So as we are having also old hospitals, and of course schools also, and we try to build new facilities to have order. So we got the point. We got the point. So this is the point of view. Of course, this subject, in my opinion, of course, is not really against what we have seen. And of course, during the COVID pandemic, there has been a concern for the prisons, and there has been a major issue because we've been conducting visits in order to witness and to see either the prisoners, they've been benefiting from vaccines or any other treatment. So we have really very difficult situation with the facilities. They were not adapted. So this is not urgent. I could understand. Of course, some of them, they are thinking that new prisons, there will be more prisons and more detainees. But I would like also to invite people to see it from the other angle. But this is a very old demand. Mr. Bahi, we've taken so long to come back to you. So your assessment about this strategy. Please unmute. Yes.
على الميوت.
في الكورنر الشمال.
يعني المشكلة الأساسية في
main issue about this document is still in the same denial. Of course, this we found echoes in the high Egyptian officials. The 78 pages, 7 pages from the introduction and the index, and who's going to review it, and to those who are going to review it is going to find out that the main issue blocking the enhancing the situation is the public awareness, the awareness of societal, but also the impact of political parties and the impact of social organization and the impact of the Arab Spring. So the impact that we have mentioned with regard to the four types of the citizens, the political parties, the organizations and officials, this is repeated 30 times at least in the document. So this in itself, I invite Mr. Anwar al-Sadat to review and to reassess the document. I don't understand the background of the environment is working with regard to the human rights situation, but here we're talking about the definite, specific document. We wish it that this document would constitute a roadmap. Unfortunately, this document deviates us from the real pathology we are facing. Are we in front of a patient who is suffering from a headache or is having a cancer brain? So the treatment would differ from the diagnosis. So either a headache, a simple headache, or a cancer in the brain. So to be honest with you, there's something shocking. The large number of institutions, of bodies mentioned by Mr. Muhammad Anwar al-Sadat. So finally, all this, the same issue is here again. So the issue, the main problem in a state where the situation that the doctor is criticizing the healthcare conditions, is imprisoned and accused of being involved or a member of the terrorist organization. So we are talking about the awareness. So the legal activists who talking about the preventive detention is imprisoned, and then we have no information. The legal activists who is trying to raise awareness and to is prosecuted and condemned for 18 years in prison. So the legal activists, I think what needs this document and what lacks in Egypt is this really. So as I have explained, the document is large, has covered all the rights, mentioned all the rights, and in order to really assess it, I need 5-6 hours to talk about this. But I think it is sufficient here to mention just only one right, which is how. So the main issue between mentioning this right and the reality, and of course my witness here and the major witness is going to be Mr. Muhammad Anwar al-Sadat. So the document details the issue, the participation and the lack of the participation of the public opinion with the impact of the citizen on this, and of course especially the awareness and with the impact of the political parties. So in practice now, in concrete, so when the Muhammad Anwar al-Sadat citizens try to play his role as a legislator to and criticize the law of organizations, of course, he has been excluded from the parliament. When he's absolutely participated in the elections in front of el-Sisi, the media, of course, mentioned that he has been retrieving his candidature, but also as a result of fear for his election team. Of course, there's a candidate of Khalid Ali has withdrawn his participation for the same. Ahmed Shafiq has been arrested at home. The other Sami Alan, General Sami Alan, has been abducted in the street. Colonel Ahmed Consura has been condemned from a military tribunal for 5 years. All of them, they are citizens. They try to participate in the public affairs peacefully, so they are not really terrorists or something else. So, in addition, my witness also is here, Mr. Muhammad Anwar al-Sadat, when he tried for preparation of the parliamentary elections. And of course, he has founded also the alliance, the Hope Alliance. What happened? They permitted the citizen Muhammad Anwar to carry on activity in the Hope Alliance, Tahaluf al-Amal, or they punished them because they've been impacting here on the role of the political parties and the role of this societal awareness. So they have arrested the major part, the major of the leaders, but some of the Mr. Muhammad Anwar al-Sadat, they've been listed on the list of terrorists. Among them, Ziad Al-Aliwi, who's the coordinator of this alliance, of this coalition, sorry. So my fear here that maybe Muhammad Anwar al-Sadat was close to previous president, and maybe while he's listening to the analysis of the document of human rights, he's reading, for example, that it's due to the lack of the social public participation. So within this context, that Mr. Anwar al-Sadat, when he decided to withdraw his as a candidate, has warned in the press conference that he was working in order to have some constitutional reforms. Afterwards, shortly, we were absolutely quite sure about the doubts of Muhammad Anwar al-Sadat. There's a citizen who come out, we don't know him, Mr. Ahmed Badawi. He's participating in the public affairs. So what he did, he took a paper from the, and then he is demanding the constitutional reforms, and he was imprisoned. I just want to clarify the gap, the huge gap between the words, unfortunately, which hasn't got any meaning, and the bitter reality, the bitter reality of human rights in Egypt. Of course, this has nothing to do with person Khaled Ali, Muhammad al-Sadat, or others. There are tens of thousands in the prisons for years, for simply they have been imagining, or they've been thinking they have the right to participate in that sort. So the main problem, Mr. Muhammad Anwar, is not the issue of culture. The issue here and the problem that the actual regime, the state, doesn't want the participation of people in the public affairs. So there are others also. Their fate was worse, like the colleague Anwar al-Sadat in the parliament in 2012, and Muhammad al-Naggar, who has been disappeared totally from the ground. So what I want to say here, that the problem that this document is lacking or hiding is one right. So I could treat all the rights with same methodology. So the main real problem with regard to the right of participation, that the document is lacking. And the main obstacle here, which is the pillar for the philosophy of the political regime, which should be in the first position about excluding the citizens with any price, using force here to participate in the public affairs. How could I deal with such a document? So in parallel, and of course, with regard to the other rights, I just want here to demand only one right. Thank you very much.
We are reaching the last minutes of this discussion. So therefore, I will ask all the three participants in 1 minute each to answer the question, the important question you have, of course, talked about from the Arab perspective, with the recognition that there is a crisis of human rights in Egypt. Mr. Anwar Sadat, I guess, agrees with that. So the question is, how can we deal not only with the problem of human rights in Egypt, but also with the step undertaken by the Egyptian authorities by proposing this strategy? So please, in 1 minute, try to give us um, your answer regarding this question. How should we deal with this strategy?
Look, I think that I think it was Amr Magdi made an extremely important point about transparency and about information. I think that is one thing is to respond to the Egyptian government saying, you know, if there's going to be discussion based on this strategy, let's establish a common terrain of information, of transparency, the number of prisoners, what kinds of charges they're facing, etc. There are many questions because it's very difficult to sort of deal in the dark when people don't have information, when citizens in Egypt don't have information. How can they, you know, call their government to account? Same thing with you know, foreign governments and institutions. If we're arguing about the facts, so one thing is to try to use this to establish some transparency, and also for all of us to think very carefully about you know, how to try to translate any individual, any steps that might be taken on behalf of individuals into more systemic, what would be required for there to be more systemic improvements in human rights in Egypt.
أشكرك جدا. أستاذ محمد أنور السادات.
Thank you, Mr. Sadat. You are calling for dealing positively with this strategy. One of the participants, Ali Hagazi, says that we are hearing this kind of speech since the 80s of the last century. So it means that this is not the first time. The problems are deeper, and the strategy, as Mr. Bahi says, proposes that the problems that should not deal with the main role played by the state in this problem. So how can we deal with this strategy positively in order to obtain results, not only as a window dress? So I would like you to answer all this in 1 minute, please. Well, first of all, what's been said by Mr. Bahi and some of the other participants who asked questions, we don't want to be the, of course, prisoners of the past. Of course, there are many messages that are not acceptable. And of course, as we say in our dialect, we are the children of today. So let us build on what's been proposed. As it's been said, it's not about the strategy. The strategy is not the thing that will solve our problems, of course. And but it's only one step. Let's say we're going to give ourselves a timeline of 5 years, and we need all those who have an experience and expertise who could help us, and we need this help, and we will wait and see. And as we said, we are, of course, throughout the permanent commission that's been created, we are, of course, going to have a timeline and a mission, and we need to wait, because there are people who need to active who need the other parties to deal with their files quickly. And we have a lot of researchers from the Egyptian youth who would like to return to their country, and they would like to be secure and safe when they come back to their country and see their families and relatives. So let's start first with this step, and let's see if they were honest. We would of course congratulate them, and if it's not the case, we would say that what they were saying was of course something that is not real, Mr. Bahi. So can we continue, of course, acting positively with this strategy, or continue to send statements? Since 36 years, the Organization for Human Rights in Egypt, our organization has always been issuing statements, but also making negotiations. Personally, maybe I'm the only activist in Egypt who met with ministers of interior in Egypt in presence, one by one, head to head. So the human rights organizations are not, of course, opposition parties, but they do have an independent position and attitudes regarding the issue of human rights. And these organizations try to show by all the means they have, whenever it's not possible to negotiate with the state, we cannot oblige the state to negotiate with us. But if the state is serious this time, like it's been said by Mr. Sadat, the state has to open channels of direct dialogues with the independent Egyptian organizations. So I mean, of course, the independent organizations from inside Egypt and outside Egypt, including the Egyptian activists who are following their work on Egypt throughout the organizations like Human Rights, Mr. Hussein Bayoumi, and others belonging to other organizations. We need to have this common dialogue in order to set up a sort of roadmap. But for this dialogue, the state has to be represented by, of course, representatives who have the authority to make decisions. So the document with its actual form is only words. I know you're not the one who drafted it. It's only, of course, words contained in 78 pages, but it doesn't represent any basic political will to move forward, not even one step forward. Thank you, Mr. Bahi, and thank you to all the participants. I'm sorry for the other participants for the questions they asked, and I could not, of course, do that. Personally, I have many questions I could not ask, but this is the time allocated. We have to respect it. Thank you very much for this debate. I think we have, of course, viewpoints that are different between us, and other things are about which we agree. For example, like the idea that says if we want to make this this strategy a good starting point, there's the idea of having this dialogue with all the parties and with the organizations of human rights that are independent, and also the idea proposed by Michel. Maybe we can, of course, have a positive, of course, approach with this strategy, like Mr. Mohammed has said, because we need to have, of course, an indicator that there is some sincerity in what's being proposed. Thank you very much for your attention once again, and see you soon. Thank you very much once again on behalf of the Cairo Institute, and I would like to thank all the participants who followed us in this forum. So I think we're going to have future meetings to discuss the actual situation in Egypt and in the Arab world. Once again, thank you very much, and goodbye. Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.
Teşekkür ederim efendim. Teşekkür ederim.